Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Friday, the 28th of June in London. I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today, President Biden delivers a faltering debate performance as Donald Trump doubles down on falsehoods. The IMF blasts the US over the size of its deficit and increasingly protectionist policies. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump have held their first head-to-head debate in the run-up to November's election. The two men clashed on everything from the economy to foreign policy, abortion and even the quality of their golf game, as they each sought to win over undecided voters. But it was the repeated stumbles by President Biden that caught the attention of many, with a performance that exacerbated concerns about his age. Here's one such stumble on healthcare during the CNN debate.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
The shaky performance threatens to wound Biden's already sputtering campaign, fueling Republican attacks. That, at the age of 81, the oldest president in US history, is not fit to serve another 4-year term. Trump sought to capitalise on Biden's missteps, taking a swipe at his rival during the exchange on immigration.
There are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Trump's performance during the CNN debate was not without missteps, though, and when asked about Americans struggling with opioid addiction, the former president talked about immigration and Russia's detention of a Wall Street Journal reporter. When it comes to the matter of policy, though, the dividing lines between the two men were clear, with former President Trump repeatedly and awkwardly sidestepping questions about whether or not he would respect the results of the election. Here is CNN moderator Dana Bash asking the question for a second time and the response.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election regardless of who wins?
Just to finish what he said, if I might, Russia, they took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it.
Former President Trump also repeated numerous untruths during the debate, falsely claiming credit for a cap on Medicare insulin prices and also saying that the January 6th rioters were invited into the Capitol by police. And President Biden was keen to draw a clear distinction on the area of trust with his rival, focusing on Trump's many legal challenges.
The crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
But despite some strong moments, Democrats publicly and privately expressed alarm in the aftermath over Biden's performance. Speaking on condition of anonymity, one Democratic lawmaker told Bloomberg that the president appeared a shell of his former self and that the party must have a conversation about replacing him on the ballot. Now, moving on, but also focused on the US, the IMF has criticised the United States for running deficits that are too big, being weighed down by debt and increasingly aggressive trade policies. Despite referring to the world's largest economy as robust, the fund slightly downgraded its estimates for growth for this year by 0.1% to 2.6%. The IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, added that the US Federal Reserve should proceed carefully when it comes to rates.
The policy rate should be lowered only after there is a clear evidence that inflation is sustainably returning to the 2% target.
The IMF's Kristalina Georgieva speaking there. The global financial watchdog also cautioned that unsustainable US borrowing and competition with China are creating risks for the world's economy. Now, the leaders of France's three main political parties have taken part in another televised debate there. Speaking during the event on France 2, the participants focused on international relations. Jordan Bardella from the far-right National Rally vowed to protect Ukraine.
So my position is simple. Supporting Ukraine to avoid an escalation with Russia, which is, I remind you, a nuclear power. If tomorrow I become prime minister, no French soldier will be sent to Ukrainian soil.
Jordan Bardella's commitment to avoid deploying French troops to Ukraine was echoed by the Socialist Party's First Secretary, Olivier Faure.
There are red lines. Sending ground troops is absolutely not requested, neither by Zelensky nor the Ukrainians. It's absolutely useless.
Olivier Faure there speaking through a translator. He went on to criticise President Macron's approach to the conflict. Meanwhile, the serving Prime Minister Gabriel Attal emphasised the consequences of a Russian victory.
If Russia won over Ukraine, it would also be terrible for the daily lives of the French. Energy bills would explode with more destabilization, and there would be a very significant wave of migration to Europe.
That was Gabriel Attal from Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party there via a translator. Today is the last day of campaigning in France before the first round of voting this Sunday. European Union leaders have nominated Ursula von der Leyen for a second time as President of the European Commission. The decision comes as part of an agreement on top jobs for the bloc's next 5-year mandate, but will still require confirmation in the European Parliament. Speaking to reporters following the news, Ursula von der Leyen discussed her next steps.
For me, this means that I now will seek confirmation from the European Parliament on my appointment after presenting my political guidelines for the next 5 years. So there's another step to do on the way forward. Thank you.
Ursula von der Leyen speaking there. Alongside her nomination, the Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa was endorsed as the head of the European Council, and the Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas was picked as the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security. Von der Leyen was confirmed for her last term as Commission President by the narrowest margin in the EU's history. Now, let's dig into the main story this morning for us. Even here in Europe, watching closely, they were introduced as the 46th President of the United States and the 45th President of the United States, Biden and Trump, their first head-to-head debate. We did actually seem to learn something new about the candidates running in November's presidential election. And joining me now to discuss is Bloomberg's John Harney, who is in Washington, D.C. for us. John, you're staying up very late to speak to us, so we really appreciate it. President Biden looked wobbly right from the start. Did he dispel concerns about his age?
The most important thing he had to do tonight was to show that at age 81, he has the stamina, the acuity, the fitness to take this most important, monumental job for another 4 years. And he clearly did not do it. He came across, halting, sure of himself, spoke very fast in a very low voice, misspoke several times. Now, he did improve as the hour and a half wore on, but clearly did not do what his campaign had set out to do. They're the ones that called for this debate in the first place.
So that seems a significant concern then for the Democrat camp. The former President Trump has been convicted of falsifying business records. He faces 3 more criminal indictments. Did he stick to facts? How did he come across?
He often did not answer questions that were put to him and kept going back to his main themes, that inflation is out of control and that it's Joe Biden's fault and that the border is wide open. The United States is being flooded by migrants and that the country is not respected around the world. Joe Biden is responsible for all of this. He certainly was not accurate when he spoke about insulin, because insulin was much more expensive, and so they're putting it out of reach for a lot of people with diabetes. He claimed that he had put in place a policy to make it cheaper. That wasn't true. He minimized his involvement in the January 6th insurrection, for which he does face federal charges. And he pointedly did not answer clearly whether or not he would accept the results of this November's election.
So that's a sort of brief assessment of what they said. But in terms of the economy, there does seem to be a disconnect, doesn't there, between voters and the data, something that we focused on, of course, on Bloomberg. In terms of the, what they managed to enlighten us on when it comes to the economic policies.
It was a very unusual debate where two people who, one is president, one was president, are facing one another a second time. So both presented their versions of the economy as superior and their opponents as terrible. Joe Biden spoke of the legislation, the economic legislation to promote green energy policies and bring chips manufacturing and other industries back to this country and the jobs that come with them. Of course, Trump spoke of his economic accomplishments before the pandemic and during the pandemic, and he pointed out the inflation was much lower. So both tried to make their economic stewardship as preferable to the other guys.
Okay, a last thought then, John, in terms of what we'll take away from this. I mean, there's another presidential debate that's meant to be coming. Obviously, we were watching it also for foreign policy. There was some talk of Israel and Hamas, of tariffs on China, also a big one.
Trump again said that the Ukraine war and the attack by Hamas would not have happened under his watch. Of course, he's provided on all the previous occasions he said it tonight no evidence of why that's true. Biden wasn't particularly persuasive enough as to what he's done, whether you disagree with his policies or not. But he pointed out that he has united 50 countries in the effort to counter the Russian invasion, and he, he also was very supportive of Israel, even though, of course, his administration has come into great criticism from other Democrats for the Israeli campaign in Gaza. So he had to walk a very fine line there. And Trump, of course, was very critical of both of his policies, on his record on both Ukraine and Israel.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.